From Dr. Reiff. For Jacob Dye, he hails from Swords Creek, Virginia, and Honaker High School. He is a senior religion major who has served as a leader in several contexts on campus during his time here. He's been a resident advisor, officer for Dominecker Social Fraternity and the Calliopean Literary Society, an ambassador for the Blue and Gold Society, and a member of Blue Key National Honor Society. In campus spiritual life activities, he has coordinated the Encounter Worship Service for over 2 years, served as an interim in the Church Leadership Fellows Program and the Summer Defining Moments Program. He is the youth leader at Mountain United Methodist Church in Chilhowie, and after graduation next month with an honors diploma, Jacob will attend Duke University Divinity School in the fall to begin his study for a Master's of Divinity degree. He is a candidate for the ordained ministry in the United Methodist Church.
White Christian America is dead. Or, more to the point, with the election of Donald Trump, white evangelical Christianity is dead. In their quest for political power, white evangelicals have forfeited what claim to ecclesial power they may once have had. Now, I don't say this lightly. As someone who was a member of a Southern Baptist church throughout high school and my first year at Emory and Henry, I used to proudly proclaim myself to be an evangelical. In fact, even though I came to Emory and Henry with plans to go on to law school and then into politics, it was in a Southern Baptist church that I began considering a future in ministry. Throughout my time at Emory and Henry, I fell in love with Methodist theology and joined the United Methodist Church. And now, as I come to the end of my time at Emory and Henry, I am a religion major and a certified candidate for ministry in the United Methodist Church. But I have maintained my passion for politics. And as a former evangelical who has studied politics and religion at the same time that Donald Trump has ridden the white evangelical wave into power, I find myself in somewhat of a unique position, being able to both understand white evangelicalism as someone on the inside, but also able to critique white evangelicalism from the outside. During the 2016 presidential campaign, I was aware that white evangelicals and their leaders were supportive of Donald Trump. However, in the days after the election, when the number came out, the number that many of you may be familiar with, that 81% of white evangelicals supported Donald Trump, I was surprised. Now, I will clarify that 81% of white evangelicals who voted for Donald Trump. But this is still an extremely significant portion of the electorate, as white evangelicals accounted for 45% of Donald Trump's total votes. That means that out of the 62.9 million votes that Donald Trump received, 28.5 million of those came from white evangelicals. Another important figure that came out during the 2016 campaign and is directly related to these results is the figure that was derived from this research question. In 2011, people are asked, can an elected official who commits an immoral act in their personal life still behave ethically and perform their duties in their public and professional life? As you can see, in 2011, white evangelicals were the least likely to answer yes to this question, with only 30% answering in the affirmative. However, in 2016, during Trump's campaign, this number skyrockets to 72% for white evangelicals. Now, when confronted with these numbers, the typical question that people are drawn to ask is, why? Why did white evangelicals sacrifice their values in order to support Donald Trump? The reason that white evangelicals typically point to explain their voting motivation is the issue of abortion. However, a 2016 study by the University of Chicago tells a different story. White evangelicals were asked, which issues, not limited to a single one, were very important to them in deciding how to cast their votes. Terrorism came in first, with 89% of respondents saying it's very important to them, followed by the economy with 87%, immigration and foreign policy at 78%, but abortion was 11th out of a list of 14 options, with only 52% of white evangelicals listing this issue as very important to them. Robert Jones of the Public Religion Research Institute offers a different explanation as to why white evangelicals supported Donald Trump by looking at the declining number of white evangelicals. From 2006 to 2016, the white evangelical share of the population dropped from 23% to 16.8%. White evangelicals fare even worse when we look at younger generations, accounting for only 10% of 18 to 29-year-olds. And the largest evangelical denomination, the Southern Baptist Convention, reports a declining growth rate since the 1950s and began losing members starting around the early 2000s. Because of this, white evangelicals saw their social prominence and their political power slipping away from them. And in order to reverse this trend, they threw their support behind Donald Trump, a man who has claimed that he has never asked God for forgiveness because he has no need to, has referred to 2 Corinthians as 2 Corinthians, has been married 3 times, has committed adultery, owns casinos, and has bragged about the sexual attractiveness of his daughter. Typically, this would cause any Bible-thumping evangelical to balk. Add to this Trump's unchristian rhetoric towards women, African Americans, immigrants, Muslims, the LGBTQ community, and people who are disabled, and it would seem clear to many that Donald Trump was not a suitable option for Christians. Nevertheless, faced with a loss of power and social standing, white evangelicals and their leaders gave Donald Trump a stamp of approval. Now, we may be tempted to say that at least they did this reluctantly. However, I make the argument that it was the theology encountered in white evangelicalism that led these Christians to support Donald Trump and has encouraged their support of Trump throughout his presidency. Several factors and aspects of white evangelical theology can be pointed to explain how they have gotten to where they are now, such as a view of sin as a personal issue rather than a societal one, and an emphasis on salvation in the next world rather than making this world a better place. However, the aspect of white evangelical theology that I point to that best explains their support for Donald Trump is white Christian nationalism. This theology holds that the United States is a Christian nation and was ordained so by God. Further, white evangelicals of this strain typically see the United States as a white country, viewing natives and immigrants of color as outsiders. Some proponents of this theology, such as Dr. Robert Jeffries, have gone so far as to say that Christians can love God through their love of country and that Christianity needs America. Because of this view, white evangelicals felt very comfortable casting their votes in support of someone who they felt would make themselves more prosperous at the expense of virtually every minority community. Likening Donald Trump to King David, who led Israel well despite his own personal shortcomings, or even the biblical figure of Esther, who saved a persecuted Jewish minority from destruction at the hands of the Persian Empire, white evangelicals enable themselves to excuse Donald Trump of any and all immorality because they see him as rescuing them from some sort of personal persecution. And in fact, white evangelicals do believe themselves to be persecuted in the United States, as this chart shows that they see themselves as more persecuted than Muslims. White evangelicals have for years cast themselves as values voters, but it appears that they have traded in this title in their search for political power. But the church need not be concerned with gaining the favor of the empire. In fact, the very presence of the church should threaten the empire, as the church stands to offer an alternative. In place of power, mercy. In place of control, liberation. And in place of class structures, radical equality. The white evangelical church has failed to offer this alternative. But all hope is not lost. If white evangelicals can begin to take the words of Scripture as seriously as they claim to, then from the standpoint of a people who have lost their power and moral superiority, they may become more committed to the Christian values of love of neighbor, hospitality to the foreigner, aid to the poor, care for the environment, and opposition to those who would stand in the way of such things. But this is not something that can happen until white evangelicals realize their error in supporting Donald Trump. And that is something that is not likely to happen overnight. In the meantime, the door is open for mainline Protestant churches to offer an alternative to people who feel alienated by white evangelicals. If these churches can maintain their commitment to Christian values, then they can show the world that Christians are not the people in the caricature that white evangelicals have painted of the church. The offer of power can be an enticing one, but it is one that should not prove alluring to Christians. Just as Jesus rejected a false offer of power in the wilderness, so too should Christians reject offers of power in these days. The church need not concern itself with greed, wealth, favor of the empire, or cultural supremacy. The church need only to concern itself with being the church. If Christians can put their trust in that, then the election of Donald Trump and the death of white evangelical Christianity may just lead to a more authentic Christian witness in the United States and the world. Thank you, and thank you to my advisors, Dr. Reiff and Dr. Fisher. Without them, this research would not have been possible.